Of concept work, a month of collecting information, then the writing. I went all out to create this website, and now I'm finally done. Check it out, boss!
How's the website about Honkaku Shochu and Awamori coming along?
Great! My best work yet.
I can't wait to see it.
Wait till you see this, boss! You're gonna love it! Oops! Oh no! No way! What? Oh dear! Oh my work! No! Come back with my data! This is terrible! Having lost the USB drive with all my work on it, I had to go collect the information I needed all over again. Here's the place.
Here?
Yes.
So, you wanted to ask me about Honkaku Shochu and Awamori.
Yes.
Natsuko, you've heard this before, right?
Yes, but I'm eager to hear it again.
Saito, I know you enjoy Honkaku Shochu and Awamori, but how much do you know about the production method?
Not much. They're distilled spirits made from raw ingredients like rice, barley, and sweet potato, right?
True, but there's much more to it. When you understand how Honkaku Shochu and Awamori distilleries create distinctive taste and character, your appreciation of drinking them will grow. Let's start with Honkaku Shochu. Honkaku Shochu is a traditional Japanese distilled spirit produced in various parts of Japan, but especially Kyushu. First, we need to talk about the raw ingredients, yeast and koji mold. Honkaku Shochu is an alcoholic beverage. That alcohol is produced by yeast, a type of microorganism, through alcohol fermentation. Yeast ferments sugar molecules into alcohol. So the first step in making Honkaku Shochu is to provide the sugar they need.
So, can the sugar come from fruit?
Good question. To oversimplify somewhat, if you start with fruit, you end up with brandy. Sugars are also found in sugar cane. That is used to make Kokuto Shochu, brown sugar shochu from the Amami Islands.
Sugarcane shochu.
On the other hand, grains and tubers like you see here contain lots of starch. But yeast cannot ferment starch directly into alcohol. Starch is composed of chains of glucose. The bonds between the glucose molecules can be cut by the action of enzymes, turning starch into glucose. The enzyme that snips these bonds like a pair of scissors is called amylase. In Honkaku Shochu production, a type of mold called koji is used to produce this amylase. Using mold this way was something that the pioneers of Honkaku Shochu hit upon after long years of effort. Koji mold is well suited to Japan's climate conditions. There are several kinds of koji mold, distinguished mainly by the color of their spores. Honkaku Shochu production uses mainly white koji mold, which has white spores, or black koji mold, which has black spores, to make the needed amylase. Yellow koji mold has yellow spores and is used in making essential Japanese foods like sake, miso, and soy sauce. It is also occasionally used in Honkaku Shochu production. The power of amylase to snip molecular bonds allows Honkaku Shochu to be made from a wide variety of raw ingredients. The long list shows that koji mold is truly a do-it-all microbe.
So koji mold is really essential to the process.
Sakekasu shochu, shochu made from sake leaves, distills the alcohol present in the byproduct of sake filtration. But koji mold is also used in sake brewing, so it's still key to the process. Now, let's talk about koji making. Koji is steamed rice or steamed barley that has a culture of koji mold growing on it. And koji is made in such a way that the koji mold will produce large amounts of amylase. The key is to steam the rice or barley in a way that its moisture content is low enough to still feel rough to the touch. When it is cooled to human skin temperature, it is inoculated by evenly sprinkling it with either white or black koji starter containing a heavy load of spores. Then the inoculated grains are kept in a warm, moist environment. Under these conditions, the spores will germinate and start to extend mycelia in search of food sources. The steamed rice or barley contains lots of starch, but starch molecules are too large for the mold microbes to consume directly.
So the koji mold produces amylase, which breaks down the starch into smaller glucose molecules that it can consume directly.
Exactly. But the moisture content of the steamed rice or barley is kept low, which inhibits the amylase so that not much glucose is produced. Because of this, the koji mold experiences starvation and responds by making more amylase. The result is a large amount of amylase being produced by the koji mold. This is the trick to making koji, keeping the koji mold in a starvation state.
Fascinating.
The amylase that the mold produces accumulates in the koji. Along with amylase, koji mold produces an enzyme called protease that breaks down proteins into amino acids and other enzymes that produce the distinctive aroma of Honkaku Shochu. Altogether, you can think of koji as an enzyme factory. Koji is made using a variety of methods. Here is a semi-automated koji making system. This is a traditional koji making setup. And this is a fully automated koji making system. But there is one other important function performed by white or black koji mold besides making amylase and other enzymes. That function is preventing bacterial contamination of the moromi mash. In Honkaku Shochu production, yeast ferments sugars into alcohol, and the fermentation liquid is called the moromi mash. If the mash becomes contaminated by bacteria, they can disrupt alcohol formation and produce off flavors in the Honkaku Shochu. So, protecting the moromi from bacteria is essential. Yeast is able to withstand very high acidity, but bacteria are not. So, keeping the moromi mash highly acidic is the best strategy to protect it from bacterial contamination. How is the moromi mash kept acidic? Both white koji mold and black koji mold produce large amounts of citric acid. So when steamed rice or barley is inoculated with koji mold to make koji, along with enzymes, a large amount of citric acid is produced to acidify the moromi mash. It took the pioneers of Honkaku Shochu making much time and effort to discover that certain koji molds have the power to efficiently make the needed enzymes and citric acid. They laid the foundation for Honkaku Shochu production today. Next, I'll explain the first shikomi, or stage of adding ingredients. The first shikomi adds a small batch of ingredients with the purpose of increasing the yeast population. Once that is done, the yeast necessary for the next stage of fermenting is available. Yeast are tiny microorganisms, so it takes a lot of them to make Honkaku Shochu. For example, it takes 300 billion yeast cells to make one 1.8-liter bottle of Honkaku Shochu with 25% alcohol. So 1,000 bottles takes 300 trillion yeast cells.
How do they get that many?
Since yeast are living microbes, if supplied with nutrients, they will multiply in population. To make the yeast multiply, a fairly small batch of ingredients is added for the first shikomi. A tank is partially filled with water. Then the koji is added, and then a small amount of yeast. This is called the first shikomi, and the result is called the first moromi mash. When the shikomi is completed, the citric acid accumulated in the koji is released, turning the moromi mash highly acidic, which prevents bacterial contamination. Also, the amylase, protease, and other enzymes accumulated in the koji now become fully activated in the presence of water. They begin breaking down the starch and proteins in the koji to glucose and amino acids. The result is that the first moromi mash becomes nutrient-rich. The small amount of yeast added to it consume these nutrients and multiply geometrically. After a week or so, the yeast population reaches the needed concentration of about 100 million per milliliter. Since the yeast are multiplying as they ferment sugars into alcohol, the alcohol content of the first moromi mash reaches 10% or so. Of course, that alcohol will be part of the Honkaku Shochu. Next, I'll discuss the second shikomi. Once enough yeast are present, the bulk of the raw ingredients can be added. The first moromi mash is transferred to a large fermentation tank. The yeast, alcohol, citric acid, and enzymes such as amylase and protease of the first moromi mash are now in a fermentation tank. More water is added in preparation for adding the base ingredient of the second shikomi. If rice is added, the product is called kome shochu. If barley, mugi shochu. Sweet potatoes, imo shochu. Brown sugar, kokuto shochu. And if buckwheat, soba shochu. When adding rice, barley, or buckwheat, the grains are first washed and then soaked in water for a while, then steamed. Sweet potatoes are washed, unneeded portions cut away, and then steamed. Steamed ingredients are always cooled to skin temperature before adding to the fermentation tank. In any case, this is called the second shikomi, and the product is called the second moromi mash. The second moromi mash is highly acidic thanks to the citric acid from the first mash, preventing bacterial contamination. Meanwhile, the amylase from the first moromi mash transforms the starch and the added base ingredients into glucose, while the protease turns proteins into amino acids. The yeast consume these nutrients and further increase their population. As they do so, they boost the alcohol content by about 1% per day. This is the second moromi mash of mugi shochu. Carbon dioxide gas, a byproduct of alcohol fermentation, creates the bubbles in the mash.
Oh, I've seen this before.
Yes, this is a common sight in sake brewing. At this stage, the yeast is fermenting sugars to alcohol and also creating appealing aromas from amino acids, which build up in the second moromi mash. After about 2 weeks of alcohol fermentation, most of the starch in the barley has been converted to glucose and then to alcohol, which now makes up about 17% of the mash. This is the second moromi mash of Kome Shochu undergoing fermentation. For Kome Shochu, its alcohol content reaches about 18%. This is the second moromi mash of Imo Shochu undergoing fermentation. For Imo Shochu, its alcohol content reaches about 14%. Now, let's talk about distillation. After fermentation is completed comes distillation. The second moromi mash is placed in the vessel of a single pot still like this and heated to raise the mixture's temperature. When it reaches the boiling point, the mash begins to boil furiously, generating an alcohol-rich vapor. The vapor rises inside the still. There, it is cooled by indirect contact with cooling water and condenses into Honkaku Shochu. The freshly made Honkaku Shochu passes through an alcohol meter box into a receiving tank. The distillate contains alcohol as well as aroma compounds, those with the characteristic aroma of the base ingredient and those produced by the yeast. They give Honkaku Shochu its mellow flavor redolent of its base ingredient. There are many kinds of distilled spirits in the world, but among them, Honkaku Shochu stands out for retaining the characteristic flavor of its base ingredient. This is a Honkaku Shochu distillery. And this is a wooden pot, single pot still. Now, I'll discuss storage and aging. Fresh Honkaku Shochu still has a flavor with rough edges, so it is stored and aged for several months or even years. These are outdoor stainless steel storage tanks, and these are indoor enameled cast iron storage tanks. This is barrel storage, and this is ceramic urn storage. Aging smooths away the rough edges of the flavor, making the Honkaku Shochu milder. Aging for years imparts not only mildness, but new complexities of flavor. Finally, I'll talk about bottling and shipping. Honkaku Shochu, aged to a well-balanced flavor profile, is diluted with pure water to an alcohol content of 20%, 25%, or 30% for clear product differentiation in the marketplace. Then the Honkaku Shochu is bottled and shipped. And that's the whole picture of the Honkaku Shochu production process.
It's quite a complex process, isn't it?
Yes, one that demands skilled workers who have mastered both traditional techniques and the latest technologies. They enable distilleries to create authentic, unadulterated, and flavorful Honkaku Shochu that's bacteria-free. Now, let's look at the production process for Awamori. Awamori is a traditional Okinawan distilled spirit produced on Okinawa Island, Miyako Island, Ishigaki Island, and Kume Island, among others.
And awamori is made with Thai rice, right?
You know your stuff. Yes, the base raw ingredient for awamori is indica rice, long-grain Thai rice. That and the traditional use of black koji mold set it apart from Honkaku Shochu. The shikomi method is also different.
So even though it's shochu distilled in a pot still, it's called awamori.
Yes. Okinawa has many excellent and distinctive spirits. Let's look at the awamori production process. First, as with making Honkaku Shochu, comes the process of fermenting starch into alcohol. To make awamori, the starch in Thai rice must be transformed into glucose that yeast can then ferment into alcohol. Starch is composed of chains of glucose. The bonds between the glucose molecules can be cut by the action of enzymes, turning starch into glucose. As in making Honkaku Shochu, the enzyme amylase, produced by koji mold, is used to snip these bonds. In the making of Honkaku Shochu, either white koji mold, which has white spores, or black koji mold with black spores can be used. But by definition, to make awamori, white koji mold must not be used, only black koji mold. This rule protects the specific traditional process and flavor characteristics of awamori distilling. Amylase is made by inoculating steamed Thai rice with spores of black koji mold to make black koji from Thai rice. First, the Thai rice is washed, then soaked to boost its moisture content, then steamed to a degree that holds down its moisture content. This promotes greater production of amylase by the black koji mold. The steamed Thai rice is cooled to skin temperature, then mixed with koji starter and inoculated with spores of black koji mold. It is then kept warm overnight. The spores germinate and start to extend mycelia. Meanwhile, the koji mold produces amylase, which breaks down starch into smaller glucose molecules to fuel the yeast's population growth. The next day, operations shift to the koji making system, where black koji mold growth and amylase production are accelerated. Along with amylase, black koji mold produces protease, which breaks down proteins in Thai rice into amino acids and other enzymes that produce the distinctive aroma of awamori. The amylase, protease, and other enzymes that the black koji mold produces accumulate in the black koji. So does the citric acid that black koji mold also produces in abundance. About 2 days after inoculation with the spores, the Thai rice is thoroughly covered in black koji mold. This means the black koji is ready. In making Honkaku Shochu, there is a first shikomi to produce sufficient yeast for alcohol fermentation. It is followed by a second shikomi for the main fermentation that builds on the results of the first shikomi. In contrast, the awamori making process has no preliminary shikomi stage. There is only one shikomi stage, the main fermentation. Water is added to the fermentation tank. Then all the black koji produced is added to it. Also added is a small portion taken from another moromi mash already in process that is fermenting well. This boosts the yeast population. This concludes the shikomi stage. In awamori shikomi, absolutely no other raw ingredients than black koji are added. It is a black koji only shikomi. This is a key distinction of awamori. After the single shikomi stage, the citric acid released by the black koji turns the moromi mash acidic, protecting it from bacteria. Meanwhile, the amylase breaks down the starch in the black koji into glucose, while the protease turns proteins into amino acids. The yeast consume the glucose and amino acids, and their population grows. As they do so, they ferment glucose into alcohol. As the yeast ferments sugars to alcohol, it also produces appealing aromas from amino acids, which build up in the moromi mash. Carbon dioxide gas, a byproduct of alcohol fermentation, creates the bubbles in the mash. Alcohol content rises at a rate of about 1% per day. After about 2 weeks, most of the starch in the black koji has been converted to alcohol, ending the fermentation stage. The alcohol content of the mash is about 17%. After fermentation comes distillation. The moromi mash is placed in the vessel of a single pot still and boiled by steam injection or indirect heating. When the mash begins to boil, it gives off an alcohol-rich vapor which rises inside the still, undergoes indirect cooling, and condenses into awamori. Along with alcohol, the distillate contains compounds with the characteristic aromas of the black koji base ingredient and those produced by the yeast. These give awamori its rich character. Freshly distilled awamori is stored and aged in stainless steel tanks, ceramic urns, wooden barrels, etc. to smooth the rough edges of the flavor. This process makes the awamori balanced and mild. Awamori aged for 3 years or more is called kusu. High-quality kusu is rich in vanillin, the compound also responsible for the distinctive sweet smell of vanilla extract, widely used in baking. After aging, awamori is diluted with pure water to an alcohol content of typically 25% or 30% to meet standards in the marketplace, then bottled and shipped. But some awamori products have an alcohol content as high as 43%. And that is how Okinawa's distinctive shochu, awamori, is produced and brought to consumers.
I'm still wondering about a few things, though.
Well, let's move on to part 3. In parts 1 and 2, we covered the production processes for Honkaku Shochu and Awamori. Any questions about that?
I have some.
So do I.
I'd be happy to answer them.
Are high-quality raw ingredients used in making Honkaku Shochu and Awamori?
To make delicious Honkaku Shochu and Awamori, you have to use carefully selected base ingredients. If any unripe or diseased grains make it into the batch, they will produce off flavors in the distillate. And then the Honkaku Shochu or Awamori won't taste good. Sweet potatoes in particular, because of their high moisture content, are easily damaged, so thorough care must be taken to source high-quality ones. Some distilleries grow their own. Many others contract with farmers to supply them.
How important is water quality?
Oh, it's very important. Of course, the water has to be pure with no harmful ingredients or bacteria. But for making Honkaku Shochu and Awamori, it also must be soft water with mineral content suited to alcohol fermentation. The sites of prominent Honkaku Shochu and Awamori distilleries have ample supplies of soft spring water. They rely on Mother Nature to supply that key ingredient.
So in making Honkaku Shochu, rice koji and barley koji are used. What's the difference in using one or the other?
Most types of Honkaku Shochu other than Mugi Shochu are made using rice koji. Even among Mugi Shochus, there are some made with barley koji and some made with rice koji. Aside from Mugi Shochu, the choice of koji is based on tradition, productivity, and what impression or image the distiller wants to convey about the raw ingredients. But of course, the most important factor is what they think will make their Honkaku Shochu taste the best.
So flavor is the top priority.
Very much so. Recently, a distiller even made a sweet potato koji.
In Honkaku Shochu production, primarily white koji mold and black koji mold are used. What difference does it make using white koji mold versus black koji mold?
White koji mold developed from a random mutation of black koji mold that had white spores instead. Other than color, White koji mold is basically the same as black koji mold. But the use of black koji mold requires more patience because it takes a long time to make really black koji. So along the way, the flavor of the koji is intensified and more enzymes involved in creating that flavor are produced. So Honkaku Shochu made with black koji mold tends to have a richer profile on the whole than that made with white koji mold.
People associate black koji mold with richer flavor. But why is awamori made only with black koji mold?
Well, black koji mold is native to Okinawa and has been traditionally used there to make awamori. Distillers want to preserve that rich, distinctive flavor that comes from the Thai rice-only, black koji-only shikomi method.
Do different distilling methods have any effect on the products?
There are two main methods of distillation. One is atmospheric distillation, done under normal pressure of 1 atmosphere. The other is vacuum distillation, using vacuum pumps to reduce the pressure inside the still to around 0.1 atmospheres. With atmospheric distillation, the moromi mash starts to boil at a temperature of around 90 degrees Celsius. With vacuum distillation, the lower pressure lowers the boiling point to around 50 degrees. Alcohol distills more or less the same even at different boiling temperatures, but the flavor and aroma compounds in the moromi mash do distill differently based on temperature. The moromi mash contains both volatile compounds responsible for lighter aromas and flavors, and less volatile ones that bring richer aroma and flavor. Atmospheric distillation will distill both types of compounds out of the mash, resulting in a shochu with rich and mellow character. But with vacuum distillation, only the volatile compounds responsible for lighter aromas and flavor will distill out, and not less volatile ones that bring richer aroma and flavor, resulting in a shochu with light and clean character.
Why are Honkaku Shochu and Awamori aged after distilling?
Well, the answer is freshly distilled Honkaku Shochu and Awamori have rough, uneven character. Aging them for a while rounds out the flavor, so they taste better.
What causes the flavor to become rounded?
In freshly distilled Honkaku Shochu and Awamori, the water and alcohol solution is not yet stabilized, so the alcohol has a sharp edge. During aging, more and more of the alcohol molecules become surrounded by shells of water molecules. This blunts the harshness of alcohol and rounds out the flavor. Once the harshness of the alcohol is blunted, its sweetness that has been masked can come through. This plays a part in rounding the flavor.
Alcohol has a sweetness?
Yes, it does. Alcohol creates taste perceptions of both harshness and sweetness. When the harshness is mitigated, the sweetness emerges. The sweetness of alcohol comes across as fresher and cleaner than the sweetness of sugars. It's very satisfying to the mature palate. The sweetness of alcohol is an essential element in making Honkaku Shochu and Awamori taste delicious.
What kinds of containers are used for aging?
Stainless steel tanks, enameled cast iron tanks, ceramic urns, and wooden barrels.
Ceramic urns.
Urns make outstanding storage vessels for aging. Calcium and other alkalines leached from the ceramic surface of the urn neutralize acidity in Honkaku Shochu and Awamori, creating a milder flavor. Based on that, you might think that aging in stainless steel tanks wouldn't make the flavor milder, but it definitely does too. The mechanism is not fully understood, but that just hints at the untapped possibilities of Honkaku Shochu and Awamori.
What happens to the flavor after several years of aging?
Careful aging of Honkaku Shochu and Awamori over several years mellows the brashness of the young spirits and makes them more rounded. Complex new aromas develop.
What kind of aromas?
Awamori that's been aged 3 years or more is called kusu. I explained about kusu in part 2 on the Awamori production process. Good kusu contains a sweet-smelling compound called vanillin. A compound found in the Thai rice used as a base ingredient is broken down by enzymes, which are produced by black koji mold. Then the activity of yeast and the heat of distilling do their work. Finally, as the awamori is aging, it gradually becomes vanillin. There is something almost epic about the sweet aroma of vanillin taking years to appear. So, you've heard Part 1 on the Honkaku Shochu production process, Part 2 on the Awamori production process, and Part 3 on what makes Honkaku Shochu and Awamori delicious. Now, do you feel like you understand how these spirits are made and why they taste so good?
Yes!
Some parts of the production process still aren't fully understood. So, technical staff involved in Honkaku Shochu and Awamori production are working with national and prefectural research institutions to further develop techniques.
Good luck to them.
Many distilleries and producers are working hard to bring the public these great tasting spirits.
I'll enjoy drinking Honkaku Shochu and Awamori more than ever, knowing about the hardworking people behind the spirits.
Great! Well, that concludes my talk about Honkaku Shochu and Awamori production. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
That was so informative.
I learned so much.
You went once before, though.
Yes, but I didn't remember a thing. It sounded all new.
Let's grab a drink.
Sure.
At least let me open the door for you.
Tonight, it's my treat.
Forget it.
Give me a break.
Come on in!
Mr. Tsudo?
Tsudo?